So my name is Justin and this lesson is part of Unit 2 learning about the language, and we're talking about the present progressive structure. So earlier we spoke about the present simple, so now we're going to look at the second present tense, which is the present continuous or present progressive form. Again, we said that the present simple is used usually for things you do out of habit or things you do every day, whereas the present progressive is used for an action right now, at this very moment. So it takes into account our auxiliary verb to be, which actually helps the sentence to be completed in both form and in meaning. So again, we're going to look at the affirmative, the negative and the interrogative structure, and then some points when teaching both tenses. So looking at your first PowerPoint slide, you see the form of the present progressive tense. And it's formed basically beginning the same as the present simple, with your pronoun, followed by your auxiliary verb to be, followed by your main verb with the present participle ing. So you would have, for example, I am working. And it is basically contracted also from I am to I'm, with the I and the apostrophe and the M. Again, for the third person, again it will change. He, she, it is looking. So that's the affirmative structure. Having a look at the negative structure, we need again the auxiliary verb followed by the negative particle. So you have the pronoun first, let's say he, auxiliary verb to be is, followed by negative particle not, followed by working or looking. And again we contracted to he isn't working. So again, it's important for us to know this, but also for the students to be able to spell and create the actual sentence. Now there are two options when contracting. You can have as above, he's not looking, or you could have they're not looking, or he isn't looking. So you can have the contraction or you can have the full form. In the interrogative, the question structure, again, it's very similar to the present simple in that you basically invert your auxiliary verb to the beginning to form the question. So you see on the slide, is he looking or are they looking? In a normal affirmative sentence, it would be he is looking or they are looking. So again, that was the structure. Like with the present simple, we're going to look at the different functions of the progressive present. And again, this is important to make your students aware of when they have to use, when they must use the continuous tense. The first function is to talk about the events in progress at the moment of speaking. So that's really the main function that we're talking about right now. For example, I am looking across the road now and all I can see is a chemist shop. Now you see that the second part of the sentence goes back to present simple. The first part is your present continuous of what you are doing exactly right now. So I am looking. And it's contracted to I'm looking. There are some more examples you can have a look at in that PowerPoint. Another function of the present progressive is to discuss temporary nature of events. So again, something that is unfinished. And this is where the name of the tense progressive, progression, or continuous, continuing, not finished. For example, they are traveling through Italy at the moment. She's having a bad time right now. The next function of the present progressive tense is repeated events in temporary context. So remember that it is temporary, it's not completed. It's to describe actions which are repeated or regular, but are either temporary or may be judged to be temporary. For example, she's seeing him quite a bit at the moment. So she's seeing him fairly regularly at this moment. An interrogative example, is she still swimming 3 times a week? So this implies that she has recently begun swimming and she's now still swimming 3 times a week. If you compare it to, does she still swim 3 times a week? This implies she has always swum 3 times a week, whereas present progressive implies more that she only started recently. The third function of the present progressive is a process of change. For example, he has been in hospital for 3 weeks, but he is improving steadily. So you have the state and you have the gradual change of him improving while in hospital. Another example would be they're building a new bypass. It'll be good for the town, but it's taking ages, a long time to finish. So again, it's a process of change, something that started recently and is still changing at the moment. The fourth function of the present continuous is used with adverbs of indefinite frequency. So it's regular but unplanned. And the present progressive is often used with these indefinite adverbs. For example, always, constantly, continually, forever. And it's used to describe events which are regular but not planned and often undesired. If you have a look at some of the examples on the PowerPoint, I'm always losing my keys. So again, present continuous used with always. I'm constantly telling the children not to go in there. So you're constantly doing that. It's indefinite frequency and it is continuous. There are verbs which are rarely used in the present progressive. Going back to the earlier previous example of the McDonald's example, with I'm loving it being completely grammatically incorrect. Verbs which describe mental states and processes, very rarely in present progressive. For example, believe, know, think, understand. Verbs which describe responses of the senses, such as smell, taste, hear, look. Verbs expressing emotional responses, for example, admire, adore. Verbs which describe an ongoing process, such as have to, need, and want. Speech act verbs, such as appreciate, deny, and verbs describing permanent qualities or characteristics, such as consist, contain, hold, etc. The next slide you will see in your PowerPoint you can go through, which is uses of the present simple and not the present progressive. I will go through the first one for example. You have the conversation. A says, this consists of walnuts, garlic butter. B says, it smells nice. So not, it is smelling nice. And A responds, and that's about it really. So you can have a look in your own time at the following 2 examples. Okay, the 6th usage of the present continuous or progressive is when trying to make something or a speech act more indirect and basically more polite. If you have a look at the examples on the PowerPoint, you have, are you wanting a muffin, Peter? Okay. Again, it makes it more indirect and more polite, rather than simply saying, do you want a muffin? Again, the next table shows another example. I am wondering when I could come and pick up the calendars. So it sounds more polite, more indirect than I wonder when I could come and pick up the calendars. The same with the third example. We are hoping that it will have some practical benefits, rather than we hope that it will have some practical benefits. The present simple makes it more direct speech rather than indirect speech. And the present progressive makes it in that sense a little bit more polite. Now, another important feature or usage of the present progressive tense is a future usage. For example, I'm meeting Grania tonight. This is used, it's present continuous used for the future. And it usually is based on something that has been arranged before the moment of speaking. So basically a plan. Something you've planned, we often use the present continuous. Whereas if it's unplanned and you only decide now, we use future simple will. So those were the functions of the present continuous tense. Now we're going to look at, like with present simple, the different problems that can exist for students when learning the present continuous tense. And like most of the language, the first main problem is interference from their L1. So interference from their first language. And it's important to note that many languages, such as German, have only a simple present tense. They don't have any continuous tense. And this can be really difficult for students as they don't know why we use the present continuous and they have actually never heard of it and keep going back to their own L1. Another problem that can exist is the difference between stative and dynamic verbs. A stative verb is a verb that denotes a state, whereas a dynamic verb is a verb like a common lexical verb. For example, if we say the sentence, I'm having a cold, we know immediately it's incorrect because it's a stative verb and it should only be used in the present simple. I have a cold. And then your dynamic verb, I'm coming from France. Again, we can see it's completely incorrect, should be I come from France. And again, these are mistakes that students will make when using the English language. Another error can be the student's pronunciation, particularly with the contracted form. For example, he's instead of he is. So they may give the incorrect pronunciation with he's versus he is. And the same with it's. And also you may find that students have a reluctance when it comes to using the contractions. Many students think for some reason that using contractions is considered incorrect. So we need to make sure to reinforce to the students that using contractions is very well accepted, especially in speech. Another error that students tend to make is when spelling in the present continuous. So when to double the consonant. We know that, for example, in the word plan, we double the N, planning. Stop, we double the P, stopping. Hop, we double the P, hopping. And the rule is that if it begins with consonant, then followed by a vowel, and then followed by another consonant, we double the consonant. For example, in plan, you have the first consonant L, then the vowel A, then the second consonant N, we need to double the second N. Now, if we double the final consonant, the final syllable is stressed in speech. For example, begin becomes beginning, refer, referring. And when the verb ends with a vowel and an N, we double the consonant. For example, travel becomes traveling, spelled with double L. Control becomes controlling, spelled with double L. And this rule is also applied before ED, ER, and EST. So then we have three cases when we do not double, okay? And the rule is, in the case of Y or W, we do not double the final consonant. So play stays P-L-A-Y-I-N-G. Show stays S-H-O-W-I-N-G. The second rule is, when the verb ends in E, drop the E before adding the ing. For example, move becomes M-O-V-I-N-G, come becomes C-O-M-I-N-G. And the third rule is, if the vowel sound has two written letters, we do not double the final consonant. For example, clean. The sound is EA, 2 letters EA, it remains with one N. CLEANING. Again, we need to make the students aware of the different spelling rules as they may not understand them and may not be able to use them. So, some ideas for teaching the present progressive. The first idea, which is a really good idea, is to differentiate between present simple and present continuous. And we can do this with pictures or with speech. You could say, for example, I am a teacher, I teach every day, right now I am teaching. Another method for teaching present progressive is mimes or charades, and this can be a fun method. We get the students, or you can demonstrate as the teacher first, an action. For example, what are you doing? I am combing my hair. Again, this works well if the teacher demonstrates first and then gets each student to demonstrate an action. The main thing is that we are reinforcing the rules and the structures of the present continuous. Another way is to show pictures of different characters doing different actions. For example, you can see on the PowerPoint, you have Alice, who is a music teacher. You can ask the question, what does Alice do every day? Student gives you the present simple, she teaches music every day. Then the question, what is she doing now? Student gives you the answer, she is swimming right now. Another good idea is video freeze games, and Mr. Bean works really well for this. So you could have a YouTube clip of Mr. Bean, ask what is he doing. So then the student must give you different sentences using the present continuous tense. Or you could have taped sound effects. Again, the video, you can cover the video, the sound, they have to guess what action is being done. And again, it's a nice fun way for teaching the present continuous tense. Another way is to create a diary. So the students have to illustrate future actions using the diary with different arrangements and using the present continuous. So you could have students with a blank diary. They must walk around the classroom, ask other students or invite other students to do an activity with them in the future. Then they have to answer yes or no, and they would say, I can't, I am going shopping with Mark at 2. And just a quick summary of the present simple and progressive. So the present simple sees things or time in terms of facts, truths, generalities, and permanent states of affairs. Whereas the present progressive sees time more in terms of its unfolding at that moment of speaking. And it's ongoing and not finished. So have a look at the next slide. You have 5 sentences. See which ones you think are present simple and which ones you feel are present progressive. The next slide, which you can have a look through, is the differences that may not be seen as really, really great. So very, very minute differences between the two tenses. So next we want to try to contrast between the present simple and the present progressive. This is very important to try to consolidate the difference between the two tenses with the students. And I find the best way is going back to the idea of what somebody does for a living versus what they're doing right now. Then we need to be able to contrast the habit versus the temporary action. And this again is a good way of doing that. For example, you have this picture. Ray cleans windows. He is listening to the radio at the moment. So you can collect, copy and paste pictures like this for yourself when using and teaching the present simple and the present continuous. To show how both tenses have a future use, you can compare timetables of transport, for example, train timetables, plane timetables, versus a diary, so like future arrangements. And a quick little task for the end would be for you to complete sentences with the following verbs, both in present simple form and both in present progressive form. For example, the verb wear, the verb swim, the verb walk, and the verb enjoy. And that concludes Unit 2, learning about the language, the present progressive tense.